Join me and confront your fate.
You've kept him alive so that he can die at the proper moment.
Bring him to me.
Let's find out where he is. If we find him, we can end this.
I say we jump now!
Hogwarts is threatened. Man the boundaries, protect us.
I have to go back, haven't I?
It's a suicide mission. The boy who lived, come to die.
Hi everyone and welcome once again to Geekfest Rants. Today we have a movie review. We are going to be talking about the latest Harry Potter film. Joining me today is Zeke Springer, an old friend from St. John's back in our college days. Say hi, Zeke. How are you?
Hey, what's going on, folks out there? Hey, what's going on, Carlos?
Cool. Very good. As I mentioned before, Zeke is from our college days, and I remember back then, before we had our current groups of geek and nerd conversations that we have all the time, Zeke was the source at that point. I remember I was a freshman and Zeke was pretty much on his way out, so we had a very short overlap. But my God, do I remember those conversations? They were very intense.
Yes,
And
exactly.
it was super genre driven conversations that I wish could have lasted for a few more years.
Definitely.
So Zeke, tell me about not only the latest Harry Potter film, but your introduction to the whole Harry Potter saga, because it's been so many years now. It's incredible this thing has lasted so long.
It's been, 8 years, I guess? 8 to 9 years? Pretty wild stuff. But yeah, years ago, not in the company where I worked at now, but I worked for another video company. I'm in video. And a coworker of mine was reading the books, and his wife totally turned him on to, I guess the first two had come out at that time. And he just came up to me and said, "You've got to read this. I know it's a children's book, but it's just done differently than most children's books are written." And at first I was just kind of reluctant, but I trusted this guy. So he's just like, "You got to read it. You can even borrow my wife's copy." So he gave me the first Harry Potter book, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. And I was blown away. Sure, it was a children's book, but the one main difference, it did not talk down to you. So anyone could pick the books up and read and just go on from there. And from that point on, not too long after that, I heard that they were going to make movies, and I couldn't wait for the movies to come out. And from that point on, I've seen every movie since. But it's so funny. I have way too many books to read, and believe it or not, I never read the rest of the books. So it's just like, oh, but one day.
Well, at least you're beating me on the book number because I haven't touched any of them. And my kids, my wife, and some other people that have read it, they keep telling me, "Oh, you got to read these books. There's so much more in the books that you don't get in the movies." I mean, the movies are fine, but there's so much more in there. And it's like, it just seems like such a huge commitment to get
Yes.
into these books. And I mean, you look at the size of them and you're like, oh my God. And my daughter's read like the same one 2-3 times already. I feel horrible.
And each book got bigger with the next installment, which is pretty incredible. Because the first book is only about 250 pages, if that.
Now, you've seen all the movies, I guess, as they've come out and kept up with them. So have I. My personal opinion of the movies so far, they're pretty good. I mean, they're not exactly made for me, I think. I don't know if it's my age or my particular flavor of fantasy.
Right.
I mean, it's really fantasy because this is not science fiction. It's not horror.
No.
It's got some scary elements, but it's more fantasy
Right.
you're dealing with. But I do remember some of the movies that stood out a little more than others. The darker the movies got, when you got to actually see wizards fighting with each other, that was like, ooh, this is really interesting. And, the kiddie stuff is like, okay, I get it, but I want to see the serious stuff. I want to see the more creepy, dark stuff. How have you felt about the progression of the movies so far before we hit the final chapter?
I kind of agree because it's like, for the most part, I find the movies pretty solid. They're not like, oh my God, that was amazing. They're just solid films. They're entertaining and they tell a solid story in a well done way. I don't think there's ever been a subpar one yet. But like you said, some were stronger than others. Like The second one, Chamber of Secrets, lagged in a lot of different places, and it was just like, okay, let's get to this. Let's get to the stronger plot points in here. But other ones, Order of the Phoenix, I thought was very good, and Half-Blood Prince was good. And these last two, Deathly Hallows, pretty solid. Because of the darkness and because of the angst. And because of the romance of the kids now that they were older and they're experiencing romantic feelings, that added even a more cooler element to the stories.
I think also what they also did a good job on all these previous chapters is that unlike a trilogy like The Lord of the Rings, for example, where one film leads to the next film, leads to the next film, and each film is almost like a little cliffhanger into the next one. The Harry Potter films almost feel like they could stand on their own without necessarily having to continue. They're little stories that do have an ongoing theme that moves forward, but you could kind of stop there and say, all right, I'm done. I'm good here.
Yep.
And it doesn't leave you completely hanging. There's a mystery back there if you choose to go back there, but you could kind of stop where you're at.
Right. The only one that was like that was Deathly Hallows Part 1.
That's because they broke it in half, obviously. And also, as you ramp up towards the last ones, you do get a feeling of more of a continuation to it. But I would say the first couple of ones are pretty standard. You know, they're telling you a story, and there it is for you to enjoy it.
They could be standalone, definitely. Definitely those first three.
Now, how do you feel about some of the characters that are introduced that you may or may not necessarily see again on later films? Is that necessary to have characters like that, or you only need characters that continue to tell a story throughout the film, or are they brought there just to give you some information, and once that information is given to you, they're kind of like disposable? We're done with this character. Move on.
Some characters were a little disposable, but I didn't mind that. I didn't mind having characters come in and out. I kind of like the fact that the professor of the dark arts always changed in every movie. I thought that was, it's a running gag. Oh, here's the latest professor of the dark arts. So I like that. I think it worked in that case.
Now, how about the directors? I don't remember all the directors' names, but I know that I think Chris Columbus did like the first or the...
He did, I think, the first two. I think he did. Yeah.
Now, there's a director who has the pedigree of this kind of film.
Right.
He has the Spielberg-ish kind of background.
Mm-hmm. Which is funny that you say that, because Spielberg was originally attached to the first movie.
Right. I heard something that he kind of followed it for a while, and then he detached himself.
Yeah, he backed out because he wanted to Americanize it, and J.K. Rowling was like, oh, no, you don't.
But the film still has, I think, a little bit of Spielberg in it because of the fact that John Williams got to do the music for at least a few of them and created the theme, and it has that feel. It has that John Williams feel.
I agree. It has that Steven Spielberg wonderment. I don't know what else to call it, but there's always that Spielberg-esque wonderment of, ooh, check this out.
Yeah, exactly the first couple of ones, and it might have been Chris Columbus for all we know. It could have been him because of his ties to Spielberg.
Right.
But as the films progressed, just like the story gets a little darker and more serious, so do kind of the directors. The directors are coming from some really serious, hardcore, not kid films.
Oh.
And the look of it, I don't remember the DP for all these films, but they look dark. They look really threatening, menacing looking films.
A little grimmer as we go along, which was cool.
That's right. Well, as we get closer and closer to the end of the whole saga, the Harry Potter saga, at some point apparently they decided to break up the last film into two pieces. And I remember originally they were talking about how they wanted to do them both on 3D, and they I think they actually started promoting it in that manner. But then at some point they were like, I'm not sure if they weren't ready for it or they changed their mind, but something happened that they decided to make the second to last film, part one of Deathly Hallows, a standard film.
Well, you know more about that than I do. Yeah, it was kind of weird that they decided to go along that route. Maybe it was a technological decision. Something was hampering them there. It looks like now, as far as 3D movies goes, we might have hit a wall in general as far as 3D movies go.
Oversaturating the market?
Yeah, they totally saturated the market. And now people realize that most movies will have maybe one or two scenes shot really intended for 3D. instead of the entire movie.
That's funny because I wonder if they do something like that. If all of a sudden now you know that a movie will have some major sequences in 3D and not the rest, are people going to sit in the theater with their glasses on the whole time?
Yeah.
Or are they going to be waiting for some kind of cue to happen for them to put them on? You know, that would be interesting to know.
Right, exactly. I must admit, I saw it in 2D. I did not see it in 3D.
Yeah, me too. And one of the reasons I did it was I started to read a couple of quick reviews about how normally when you see something in 3D, things they become a little darker and it's a little harder to see what you're trying to see. And this particular film, most of it takes place at night. These night battles are taking place. So I'm thinking, my God, most of this film is dark to begin with. A lot of people were saying, don't bother with the 3D. However, I did hear a couple of other reviews saying that certain sequences, not all of them, but certain, were really good with the 3D.
I heard the same things as well. I heard this. I remember seeing Larry King talk about it and rave about the 3D effects of it. Not the special effects, the 3D.
Right. Now, tell me, because the story... the book itself was broken up into two parts. Do you see these last two films as one film, or do you see it as two separate entities?
I can see it as two separate entities. This last film was more about the battle, and the previous Part 1, Deathly Hallows Part 1, was geared more towards the setup to the final battle, and all about, gathering and destroying the Horcruxes.
Okay.
Whereas this was like, okay, the confrontation is coming now.
It's kind of like you're moving the chess pieces on the board, getting ready to make the big move, but you're just placing them where you want them. It's just like in the story.
Yeah, it's like an opening moves in chess, exactly.
Now, tell me a little bit about the story itself for this final one. Look, just if you can do a little quick recap of the plot.
Okay, this one is basically kind of picks up where the last film left off. I don't know if I can give a little spoiler of the last film.
Yeah, we can go in spoiler world.
Okay, so Dobby the elf gets killed at the end of Deathly Hallows Part 1, and they transport to beaches and they hide out in I guess like a beachside home. And that's where this film picks up at. Basically, they need to find two more Horcruxes to destroy them. And they're basically trying to figure out how to make their next move and do it safely.
Right, because the trick is that you cannot take on Voldemort by yourself, just walk up to him. You have to get rid of these items first that will kind of weaken him enough to be able to fight him on his own level, on your own level.
Exactly. I think there were supposed to be 5 Horcruxes altogether, if memory serves. I think they destroyed 3 of them in the last movie, and there were 2 left in this movie. And it's like, okay, what are the Horcruxes? If you read the book, you know what they are. But if you don't...
Yeah, there are times in the movie where, I'm listening to it and I'm like, they're getting the what? I'm like, just fight. Just start fighting. Do something. Because it was a little difficult to follow, between the names of the people, right. The characters. There's so many characters and all these different things that they either have to find or they need or they must destroy. For me, I found it a little confusing. Yes. But again, I know it's me. It's me because I don't have those books in me like a lot of people do.
I totally understand. So it's like, yep, it's a chase. It's like this item leads us to that item.
Right. And again, I hate to keep comparing them to Lord of the Rings, but I had that feeling of, there's all these characters. I cannot keep their names straight. And they're all, I know what the goal is. Yes. The ultimate goal, obviously there's the big bad guy. And if I don't kill the big bad guy, he's going to kill me. But how to get to that big bad guy, like in Lord of the Rings, you got to go here, you got to find the brooch, you got to find the sword, you got to find the this, the that, the that. It's like a scavenger hunt.
Yeah, exactly. It is a magical scavenger hunt. And the journey is more important than the end game, I guess. So basically, here's my take on Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2. It all ends, that's what the posters say. And yes, my friends, the Harry Potter movie saga has come to an end. But did it end with a whimper or did it end with a bang? Well, let me tell you, it definitely ended with the most pleasing of bangs. This 8th installment in the Harry Potter movie franchise wraps up the series in a nice tidy bow, I felt. Granted, in tying that bow, fingers are bloodied and broken, but the bow gets tied. Just about everyone returns for the knockdown drag out of a bow tying party. Now, I must admit, I haven't read the Deathly Hallows book. One day I will, trust me. So my review will contain no instances of, but in the book they did this, and in the book they did that. Not gonna happen. This will be about my movie-going experience, and that's it. The film, like I said, the film picks up right where it left off. Hiding out inside an abandoned beach house, licking their wounds after fatal defeat, with barely enough time to mourn their losses. Poor Dobby. Harry and his friends do a bit of interrogation and deal making in order to make their next move with a kind of like a rogue goblin. The film is action packed and paced very well. I really felt that this movie was paced really well. I didn't get bored at any time. The story kept moving. The connection between Harry and Voldemort reaches a fever pitch, I thought, creating good suspense for their ultimate face-to-face confrontation, which you knew was coming.
Right.
When that confrontation happens, it doesn't disappoint. Bells get rung, clocks get cleaned, and bodies are knocked from pillars to posts. But the ultimate battle between the residents of Hogwarts and the Order of the Phoenix guys against an army of Death Eater devotees is pretty awesome. It's violent, it's drawn out, and it's deadly. If there's one thing I can't stand is when, in fiction, the ultimate battle is just a flash across the screen. Sort of like, if you remember the first RoboCop. Everybody knew that, like, RoboCop versus Ed 209 was going to be awesome, but it was lame. But give me a nice long beatdown, folks, and the director David Yates and the screenwriter Steve Kloves, they do just that. Speaking of direction, Yates handles the results of the battle with the right amount of pathos needed for the situation. Why? Because there are characters that we've come to know and love who go bye-bye. Sorry, no spoilers here. I give you a little Dobby spoiler for the last movie, but no spoilers as to who gets off in this movie. Daniel Radcliffe as Harry is solid once again, and he's skilled at carrying the movie on his own, because now he's a veteran. He can carry a movie on those shoulders now. Emma Watson and Rupert Grint are still on their game as Hermione and Ron, and we even get to see more of their relationship grow. Actually, I would have liked to have seen more, but there was just too much action plot that they had to deal with to kind of, with Voldemort and Professor Snape playing an even bigger role now in this movie, that they couldn't really deal with Hermione and Ron and their love interests. Some really cool moments happen when Neville Longbottom, played by Matthew Lewis, gets his time to shine. It seems like that kind of happens in a lot of movies where, like, Neville pops out, you're like, oh, it's Neville, and then Neville does something really cool. It's like, yes, Neville!
Yeah, well, at least they didn't do it to like 6 or 7 characters where sometimes it's like, it's your turn to save the day. It's your turn to save the day. At least they got one guy to do it, and he was a pretty nice guy.
He always seems to be the cavalry, which I love.
Yeah.
Ralph Fiennes, the guy chews up scenery. He was really good. I think he hammed it up, but it was a fun ham up, and he's Voldemort. He's Voldemort. I can't complain. His nasty badness is tempered with displays of vulnerability as his sources of power are jeopardized by our plucky heroes. His vulnerability is even on greater display as we learn that Voldemort and Harry are even more connected than previously realized. Again, no spoilers there. You'll find out more. Fiennes definitely handles these ranges of vulnerability shifts without a blink, and he's just a good actor. He's solid, and I like the fact that he likes being in these Harry Potter films. Alan Rickman, he's one of my favorite actors of all time as Professor Snape, and because of that, Snape is my favorite character. The new revelations with Snape surrounding the character's true motivations are pretty eye-opening and poignant. And Rickman does the role justice. And the finale, the very end of the film, it's a sweet look at how life comes around full circle. Yeah. I really like that. And I dare anyone, when they go see this movie, to not say, "aw," when you look at the finale of the film. And again, if you've seen all the Harry Potter films, I don't think you will be disappointed. There's no corny resolution. I mentioned tying things up in a bow before. The bow is tied, yes, but not very neatly by design. And thank goodness for that, because that's life. And that's how it really all ends.
Wow. My goodness. You really thought about this, I guess.
Oh, yeah. I had time to sit down, think, process it all.
It's funny because, I mean, over the last few years, and I'm not the first person to mention this, I've heard it from other people, because all the people around me have read all the books, they've known the ending of this story for quite a long time. And whenever the subject of Harry Potter comes up, I would always be like, I don't want to hear anything. I'm with the movies. Don't tell me anything because I want to be surprised. I want to know.
Exactly.
I want to know for sure when things happen as they happen, for the movies, not for the books. So I'm glad nobody spoiled it for me.
Exactly. I think the one spoiler I ever got was when Sirius Black was killed. Because I was just like, okay, I know someone gets killed in this book. Who is it? Just tell me. Just tell me who is it. Because I don't have time to read it. Just tell me.
If you really think about it, it's kind of like, well, who is the intended audience of the book? I would imagine it would be kids pre-teen or early teen, that kind of crowd. But obviously, I know it spills over in both directions. Younger kids want to read them, and
Right.
young adults and adults want to read it. But if that's your primary audience, I kind of figured, well, you're not just going to have a massacre of getting rid of your main, all your main characters left and right. No, you got to kind of end it in a way where people, the intended audience, will be kind of happy with who makes it and who doesn't make it.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
and that's exactly where they hit it. They hit it right at that. At the same time, they did get rid of some characters that are not just background characters. I mean,
Right,
there's some pretty important characters that, just like in previous films,
I
they've
was
got rid of,
surprised.
and they hit some of those characters. The relationship you mentioned earlier, I totally agree with you. It almost got to the point where when they kiss, it's kind of like, oh my God, we forgot about us. Let's kiss. And it's like, okay, I guess now the relationship is there. Something was missing there. It was like there was no realization of their relationship. It was kind of like,
Right.
cue the kiss and kiss is over. Let's move on with the fighting.
Yeah, it was almost like a bit of an afterthought because it was just like, okay,
Yeah.
we've got all this fighting to do. Just kiss, get it out of the way because now we've got to fight.
Yeah, and I don't know, just like you, does the book go into it a little more? Is there some build up to that? Did something happen between them to get them a little closer, with whatever is happening around them before they actually kiss? Or who knows? I guess we'll find out someday.
Right.
Or better yet, I'll ask my family. They probably can answer that question. But it's funny because after I saw the movie, we're driving home and I'm starting to ask questions. I'm like, well, hold on a second. Now, when they're remembering, where they're having that big remembering scene where
Right.
you're finding out of exactly what happened to this guy and how this, I'm like, okay, well, the two kids who was that? Oh, that kid was that guy. Okay. Now, what's the
Right.
relationship between this guy and this guy? Oh, nothing? Okay, fine. Okay, now what happened to so-and-so? Because I had so many questions. I'm like, I felt like an idiot. I'm like, I just saw the movie and I don't understand a lot of things.
Exactly. It's like, okay, I know who read the book. They know who that person is in the background there.
And the ending, and again, I hate to keep comparing this to Lord of the Rings, but the battle at night with the army of bad guys and the trolls coming, to me, that was so Lord of the Ring-ish.
Yeah. Oh,
It's
totally, totally.
it's a little bit of everything being thrown out there, and the wizards fighting again. It reminded me of that, and the ending scene where we saw what happens later in life.
Yes.
It's that kind of that epilogue type of
Mm-hmm.
that they give you at the end, which again, it's a little corny.
Yeah, it's a little. There were people laughing in the audience when
This is
I
a
went
kid's
to see
story. This isn't, heavy super Academy Award winning drama here. This is kids,
Right.
so it
Exactly.
fits. It works.
It. Oh, it totally does. And I think with J.K. Rowling, her intention was to kind of grow as each book goes along. That like basically the maturity level grows. So if you were a kid who was like maybe 11 or 12 and you started reading the first book, by the time you read the seventh book, you're 18, 19. And so the sensibility of an 18 and 19-year-old was in there. So that as you grew, the books grew with you. And I thought that that's basically a really cool element that J.K. Rowling added with the books.
Mm-hmm. I also agree that the revelation of the motivation behind Professor was it Snape?
Snape, yeah.
Snape. That was something that I've always been wondering about.
Exactly.
And it almost always looked like everything has a double meaning, and there's a reason behind the reason behind the reason in the previous films of what he did on previous films to lead him to this point. And yeah, at the end of this, you even get the reason behind the reason, and even after you realize what happened, there is another one behind that. There's more reasons behind everything.
Exactly.
And it's like, wow, that's from the writer's perspective, that's a lot of preparation.
Right,
To place
exactly.
these guys where you want them to be able to give you this proper outcome that they give you at the end.
Because you knew Snape was hard on him for a reason.
Yeah, and it almost, like, at times it felt like it was good intentions, but at times it was like, this guy's nasty.
Yeah.
And it's like, you never know what's going on. Is he
Yep.
really working for this guy, or is he really a double agent for that guy, or is he double crossing this one? And not until the end do you really, really get there and know
Yep.
exactly where this guy's
Where he stood. Yep, exactly.
Well, one of the things that I was a little bit let down on is the connection between Harry and Voldemort. In other words, in the previous films, we got to know a little bit more and a little bit more and a little more about Voldemort. But I felt that in this one, we already knew everything there was to know about him. I was hoping, and maybe it just doesn't work that way, but I was hoping that there was going to be some major connection between Voldemort and Harry. More of a how shall we say, more of a Star Warsy connection, a more direct connection, more of a holy crap, I can't believe this type of thing. But it's kind of like, no, we kind of know exactly where we are now. And now it's fight time.
Right, exactly. I knew that there was no relation, there was no familial relation between Harry and Voldemort. But what was funny was that basically Voldemort was trying to wipe out all the members of the Order of the Phoenix, and Harry was prophesized to come and take him down. And I knew also that Voldemort had to be, let's see, he was a kid in the 1940s, maybe 1950s. Maybe.
When they first met him.
So he's pretty old. He would probably be in his 70s maybe now. 70s or maybe pushing 80 now. And also, I think the last movie where Dumbledore visits him in the mental institution because he's already starting to lose his mind, that you knew that he wasn't related to Harry, and him and Harry, their physical connection is, hither and yon. So it's like
but that's why I found it odd that if you think about the biggest revelation is not between Voldemort and Harry, it's between Snape and Harry.
Exactly.
Or Snape and Harry's family more.
Yes, exactly.
Which is, wow, the focus is being shifted over story-wise, which is unusual. I'm not used to seeing something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I thought that was cool. I thought that was actually cool. Like we were saying before, it's like, okay, Snape is so hard on Harry. Why is Snape so hard on Harry? Here's why. And it might not be the case that he's that hard on Harry, believe it or not.
Now, here's a question that I couldn't answer, and obviously I haven't read the book, so I'm even less qualified to answer, but my daughter kept asking me, and she read all the books, why does Voldemort have no nose?
Yes.
What explains his physical appearance?
Well, see, what was it? Order of the Phoenix, where he finally came out in a physical form, and I just got the idea that it was incomplete. That whole process of him coming out in a physical form, because I think it was interrupted. The ceremony was interrupted. If memory serves, I could be wrong, but I thought there was a slight interruption in the ceremony that brings him to, physicality.
Unless it's more of a classical good versus evil thing, where if you're evil, you're going to come out looking evil.
Imperfect and evil, right.
It's the way you represent evil. So, okay, fine. I couldn't figure out where the nose went.
It's funny, a friend of mine on her Facebook page, she wrote, if Voldemort is so powerful, why can't he just make a nose? And it's like, you know what? You got a point. You got a point there.
Now, let me ask you a question. The entire series of films, they were very honest in terms of being able to keep up with their actors. There was no major changes, and especially in the kids. You know, the kids were able to continue with the film, and you saw them grow.
Right.
The biggest shocking thing I think that ever happened in the whole saga was when Richard Harris died.
Right.
And they brought in the newer actor, the different actor.
Yeah, Michael Gambon.
And I believe the only way they wrote it into it was kind of like, oh, he's a wizard, so he had to do a little work on himself or something like that. You know, they kind of shrugged it off. But it's funny now, I can't even think of Richard Harris anymore. I'm always thinking of this guy.
Exactly. I totally see the role as Michael Gambon's. He made it his own. And that's a credit to him, because Michael Gambon, he's been around for a long time. He's been doing, great work for a long time. If you want to see some really good stuff, go back to the PBS version of The Singing Detective. He was excellent in that. And if you really want to go to a campy background of that guy, check out the werewolf film called The Beast Must Die.
Oh my goodness.
It's a werewolf classic from the 70s.
Wow.
Well, let's talk a little about the future of Harry Potter. Obviously, it's all up to the writer. She can do whatever she wants.
Mm-hmm.
We have potential new characters.
Yes.
If they ever want to reboot this, which, my God, they can reboot the crap out of this.
Yes, they can.
You got your characters, you got your older characters, you got your younger characters. They can just redo the whole thing from scratch, and it wouldn't have to be a reboot. It would be sequels, really.
Yeah, sequels.
Unless they go in a completely different direction. One of the things I noticed was, and I kept asking the rest of my family, is like, well, what happens to the rest of this evil army when they're done fighting? I mean,
right.
Do they just kind of go home and, okay, fighting's over, we're going home now?
Yeah, I think that there's still going to be like pockets of resistance, but I think for the most part, what we see with what happened to the Malfoys at the end, I think that's the general result of the evil army. That, they serve Voldemort, and Voldemort's gone, so now I've got no purpose, so...
Yeah, that was also another one of these things where you're like, well, if you have somebody who betrays, or at least seems to be betraying the good guys, I guess at some point you're going to have somebody who crosses over in the opposite direction.
Right.
And it was interesting. I mean, it was a little bit rushed, but I would have liked to seen a little more development in him of changing his mind. He seemed to, I don't know, I never got the impression that he really changed his mind. I mean, when he walks from the group he's in, and that's because he happened to be on that side of the street,
right,
and he crosses over to them, I never got the impression that he's making a statement of, I reject you people. No, I'm going back home now.
Yeah. It's like,
that's unusual. I mean, it's more what the mother did.
Right.
That showed a change.
And I would have liked to have seen more development there with what Narcissa Malfoy, more buildup of that of, okay, Narcissa's having second thoughts. Let's see more of that.
Right. And the father is also kind of like, okay, he walks away with them at the end. He's walking away from the whole mess. But it's like, is he walking away because he's now has a change of heart? Or he's just kind of trying to chase his family to kind of come back to the fold?
Yeah, he did kind of run after them, kind of like, oh, wait for me, don't leave me.
Yeah, it was kind of wishy-washy. But obviously at the end, you get the impression that Malfoy kind of changed, I guess, unless it's kind of like we said before. All the bad guys are forgiven. Everybody come back into the happy
into the fold.
And the other question I had, and this will be my final question, I promise, is why is there a Slytherin school if we all know that these people are rotten to the core?
Exactly. That's
why? I mean, it's like, do you just try to herd them all in one area because this way you can keep an eye on these potentially crazy people that are about to take over?
Well, somebody's got to be good at the dark arts, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, because even Harry Potter said the name that he picked for his family members is a combination of somebody who's from this school and somebody who's that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you could say, okay, that's a good point, but it's like, man, it's like anytime anything goes wrong, it's like, okay, here they come, here they come. Oh boy, we better. What did they do in this one? They were hiding him in the basement or something, put him in the cell, lock them all up quick before
in the dungeon. That was great.
It's like, can you imagine if you're in that school? You're like, oh, come on, I didn't do anything. You're taking me away.
It was just the one girl, not
me.
I
know. And okay, take them all away. Just get them the hell out of here.
I guess, like you said, it's like this whole section in the school is a problem. go away. Just go.
I know. And the troublemakers are always in that school. It's like,
Yes.
couldn't they show some good kids that come out of there just to make it a little more, not obvious? But I guess I'm nitpicky. I'm sure we're being too nitpicky. All right. Do you have any other points you want to hit?
Oh, no, that's about it. Definitely recommend it. I'd say the movie's like a 7.5, 8. Sort of a light 8, I would say. 8 out of 10. 8 out of 10.
Okay, but is that a number you would give it for movies in general or for movies of this particular genre?
Oh, good question. Good question. Movies in this genre in particular, I'd say about 7, 7.5. And as far as the Harry Potter verse goes, I give it an 8. It's up there. It's up there.
Yeah, I agree. It definitely gets extra points for its genre.
Yeah.
And by the genre, I'm talking about, again, Lord of the Rings, movies of that sort, the modern fantasy films.
Right.
When you compare it to a heavy, heavy drama, your Hurt Lockers, your movies like that, it's apples and oranges. You cannot put these two in the same category.
Right, exactly.
And it's good because the other thing I like about it is that it bridges, like, it's not a kiddie film.
No.
And it's not too adult, too teenagery. Like, even if you're going into the realm of your Twilights and stuff like that, where it's, a little too much for a younger kid because they talk about certain things that, this is a perfect age for, it's still safe for young kids.
Right, I agree. It was a PG-13 movie. It was, sometimes you're not sure about PG-13. You're kind of like, well, why was that PG-13? It was PG-13.
It had its violence. My daughter, she was covering up, and at one point she ended up on my wife's lap and covering up and this and that, and yeah, she had her moment, but then she settled down when things settled down. So yeah, it had its moments.
Definitely, I agree. But I do recommend, if you've seen the other Harry Potter movies, definitely check this one out.
I agree. It's an adequate conclusion, in my opinion, to what you've seen before. Everything leads up to this. It doesn't completely blow me away in terms of, oh my God, I'm redefining my notion of what a fantasy film is. No, but when you're in the Harry Potter mode, this is a good ending for a Harry Potter mode.
Exactly. I totally agree.
All right, well, let's just wrap this up here. I would like to thank Zeke for joining us on today's discussion of Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2, even though we talked a little bit of Part 1, and we also talked about the other films and what led to this. Please join us again next time when we continue to discuss this and topics, including commentaries and just general geeky genre material. On behalf of everyone, thanks for listening, and we'll see you here next time on Geekfest Rants.
Take care, folks.
Let's finish this the way we started.
Together!
Only I can live forever.